Konnichiwa, Samurai James here. Today we're going to take a look at the Valiant Armory Crecy sword on loan to me from sword friend Nate. Alright, now there's obviously no unboxing with this because here it is and it's not my sword, so it's not going to be part of the review. But I'm thrilled to be able to review this. This is one of the types of swords that I've always wanted to be able to review, that being one of them by Valiant Armory, not specifically a medieval sword because I've done a few of those and I've got some more to go. What I really like about this is Valiant actually creates the sword and the scabbard together. They're definitely one of the upper tier makers. You'll often hear in the European circles about Albion or Arms and Armor. You don't as much hear about Valiant, but they've definitely stepped up their game in the last, over the last 10 years as they've improved on their skill. And they come with a scabbard. That's something that doesn't really happen for Albion or Arms and Armor. I did get a sword from Arms and Armor that came with a scabbard, but it was essentially just a piece of leather that was sewn up. There was no wood core, there was no belt or anything else, so think of it as just something that's protective for the blade. So, let's go ahead and get started, and we'll start with the scabbard. Now, this does have a really nice belt system that makes it easy to wear. It's obviously got a bunch of holes that should fit somebody of just about any size, and if it doesn't, it's easy enough to punch a hole in leather using a hole punch, and if you don't have a hole punch, a nail and a piece of wood and a hammer will actually work in a pinch. One of the things I really like with this, it has a nice, really clean bind on the back here. If you've seen my video about the omote and ura for Japanese swords, as far as what is the public and private side of a sword and how the samurai or other people carrying them would wear them, a lot of medieval European swords actually follow a similar sort of concept in the way that their scabbards are built. This is the back edge of it, which is why the join is here and you don't see much decoration to it. However, if we flip it over here, what you'll see is it's got this beautiful embossing work here. It's got the nice rain guard up here at the top, which is a really nice touch that you don't see on a lot of swords. It's got the punch work here within the scabbard on the leather to pass the belt through. It's tied off very nicely. Has some really cool medieval looking, aged buckles that don't look like modern shiny brass bits and things like that that you get on some of the other lower end ones. The scabbard itself is really nicely done. I don't know how much of this is going to show up on video. I do have some other photos and video that I'm going to mix in here. But the scabbard is a nice oxblood color that has some darker tinges to it that gives it a little bit of, texture to it. Not that the texture itself feels funny, but it's not just a straight single color, as you may see on a Japanese sword saya where it's painted a flat color. I really like the depth that it gives, and it especially pops with the embossing here. It's got a, very simplistic but very nicely fitting shape that matches up with the buckles here and everything else. And the buckle for the belt itself matches up with the smaller buckles here, which is a nice little touch. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to set this to the side and let's start looking at the sword. Now, the nice shiny stabby part, the sword itself. The blade is very well done. It's nice and straight. It has a good center of percussion. And when you tap on the handle here, hey, you like that, huh? Tap on the handle, you'll see where it vibrates as little as possible. That's the place that you actually want to be cutting with. It's not at the very end of the sword, it's not at the bottom of the sword. This has a very classic swept hilt to it here as well. It's really nicely done, it's nice and smooth, there's no burrs on it. The blade itself, we're going to be testing out shortly when I go out here to do some cutting. The gapping here in between the blade and the crossguard itself is actually quite good. There's a little bit of gap, but there's almost always going to be on a sword. And that's just something that you expect and is par for the course. Even on a higher end sword like this, there's a little bit of gap and that's perfectly normal and acceptable. The peen is fairly nicely done. I would like to see it smoothed over just a bit more. The surface itself is very flat, but there's, very visibly a peen rivet here. I'd like to see that fleshed out a little bit more, but, it's a fairly small thing in the grand scheme of things. I don't know if there's anything you can get to inset the pommel here. I think that would be really nice, or maybe if they have an option, and I haven't seen it yet, to have this smooth without the hollow in it, that would be kind of nice. This is what they call a wheel pommel because it looks like a wheel. It's also what they call a wasted grip, not wasted as in junk, but wasted as in it has a waist to it. Gives you a really nice definition of where your hand should be going on it. Some people, if they have bigger hands, may actually be gripping down on this, or if you want to get some additional leverage, you may actually choose to grip it like this on the pommel. That's not completely unheard of by any means, especially if you're going to be doing something like armored fighting and half swording. The blade itself has a nice, good, even sheen to it. The edges, as I said, we will get to cutting with shortly. It does a little bit of the fingernail scrapey test there, so that's definitely a good sign, especially down here where it doesn't even need to be sharpened. I'm not going to fool with it too much up here at the top. Yeah, the hilt here for the handle matches up with the same oxblood color with a little bit of depth in the red and black theme to it. I really like the extra risers they have. That's these 3 little pieces here. That also helps with orienting your hand to make sure you're getting in between the grips on that. I really like, and I'll try to hold this up so that you can see it well enough, that not only does the grip come down like this and taper in a wasted grip, it's also got some curvature to it at the top. A lot of the lower end swords will have just basically a straight wooden piece that's, you know, wrapped around with leather or something like that, but this is very, very well done. It's definitely got a cord wrap on top that I can't quite tell, but may be mildly epoxied in some way. Perhaps not epoxy, but something that has gone in here to help strengthen and reinforce it. It's fairly smooth to the touch. It's got enough texture to be grippy, but it's not so much that it feels like it's individual strings that I can move around. So really, really nice to see. And without further ado, I'm going to get to cutting. So for the cutting, I used some tatami, and keep in mind this is a demonstration more of the capabilities of the sword, not specifically me as a cutter. I haven't cut other than once in armor about 6 months ago for over a year, so I am quite a bit out of practice here. Taking the first shot, obviously I missed this one up just a little bit here, but second one absolutely beautiful here. Working on it, hanging up on the top with nothing supporting it. You know, this is definitely not an issue specifically with the sword. This is just me and being a little bit out of practice. Now let's move on to a few more cuts. Alright, cut through, and you know, a little bit of a drag there, but that second shot was wonderful. Spike up another tatami here. Tatami is hard to find, and it's still running about 10 or 12 bucks a roll, so I only used 2 for this review. So I'm going to try to get my most bang for my buck out of this by using as much of it as I can. Now this here is a fairly difficult cut, trying to cut it from the top, coming down on it with nothing supported underneath, and I was actually able to cut all the way through it. Give this another go. Magic hand wave to keep it in place. Find the center of percussion, and boom. Wow. Yes, that was wonderful. Only been able to do that a few times with a few swords. Now let's just see how we do as a Ginsu knife here. So we're going to go with an Unterhau, beautiful Oberhau, beautiful opposite side Oberhau. Perfect. Middle Hau. Yep, another middle Hau. And that was just absolutely wonderful. 5 cuts, perfect every time. Just an absolute lovely sword. Highly recommend it.